the Moan Broadcast Center, this is The Frame, your one-stop shop for art, entertainment, and culture. I'm your host, John Horn. On today's show, we uncover some of the sonic Easter eggs that are hidden inside the new movie, Baby Driver. Then the musician Thundercat, you're hearing his music now, talks about his many collaborations and how he got to be so good at playing the bass.
I'll be watching cartoons, but I'd be practicing bass, listening to soundtracks from movies, practicing bass. Because my mom would always tell me if she saw me sitting there doing nothing, she'd like, go pick up the bass.
But we'll start with Netflix. Last week, it picked up 91 nominations for the 2017 Emmy Awards. That's almost double the nominations that it had last year. The streaming service has 5 contenders in the Best Series categories: House of Cards, Master of None, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, The Crown, and this show, Stranger Things.
This is nuts. We have to take her to your mom.
No, 11 said telling any adults would put us in danger.
What kind of danger?
Her name is 11.
L for short.
Mike, what kind of danger?
Danger.
Netflix, of course, is no stranger to danger. In its huge bet on programming, Netflix will spend $6 billion on production and acquisitions this year. So far, is paying off. The company just reported a surge in subscribers, and its stock price soared almost 14%. Even though Netflix has canceled some high-profile and expensive shows, including The Get Down and Sense8, it plans to move forward with more original content. Earlier today, I spoke with Todd Spangler. He's Variety's New York digital editor, and he covered yesterday's Netflix report and explained the biggest takeaways.
They exceeded the number of subscribers that they signed up by a very wide margin. That gave investors a lot of optimism that the company's fast growth trajectory is not yet over. It's not reaching the top of the bell curve just yet.
So they added, I think, 5.2 million subscribers. They were projecting only 3.2 million. They also crossed 100 million subscribers globally. So at what point do you think movie studios and TV networks are going to move from being worried to being a little panicky?
Well, they've been watching Netflix with a measure of concern and envy for a while already. In fact, Netflix is a huge customer for a lot of studios and networks. In fact, most of the spending that Netflix does on content is to acquire past TV shows and films. So Netflix is, in a sense, a competitor, but it's also very good for the studios as well.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, because Netflix is spending a lot of money to get those new subscribers. I think $6 billion has been pledged to spend on content this year. What is their strategy overall? Are they thinking that as long as they can continue to grow subscribers, that kind of extravagant spending will be sustainable?
Yes. The short answer is yes. They want to increase the amount of money that they spend, not only on content, but on programming that they own the rights to outright. Instead of shows like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black, those are licensed. So it's a different economic model for them. If they own the shows, they produce them, they control what they can do to make money off of those.
Movie studios increasingly in Hollywood have looked to the global marketplace and try to make movies that they say will travel and play as well internationally as they will domestically. And if you look at Netflix's subscriber base, they now have more international subscribers than they do domestic subscribers. Does that mean that shows like Narcos, for example, that have an appeal that is as large, if not larger, outside the United States than inside the United States, are they going to be looking probably more closely at how those shows are going to travel and play internationally in the years ahead?
They are trying to think of what's going to play well with audiences around the world. Now, at the same time, you have different tastes in different parts of the world, so Netflix is going to have to increasingly spend money on local regional content that's in language, that is culturally resonant in those areas, because what's popular in India is not necessarily what's going to be popular in the U.S. or South America or parts of Asia.
The other thing that Netflix's CEO Reed Hastings talked about is he says that YouTube is still the gold standard for viewing activity. What does Hastings mean there? Why does a YouTube view count mean something that is important to Netflix?
Well, Netflix has kind of wrestled with this idea of who is their competitor. They've most often been compared to HBO for a long time, and in fact, Netflix itself has said, we want to become HBO faster than HBO can become us. So that's been the comparison so far. I think what Hastings is trying to do is set the bar higher and really reveal what his aspirations are, to be the largest source of video entertainment in the world. And, you know, I think it's mostly kind of a vision-setting thing here. Not that Netflix is competitive with YouTube really in any way. YouTube is largely ad-supported, and Netflix has no ads at all. But I think he's thinking of it in terms of, here's the vision for what Netflix is trying to be, the biggest internet video company ever.
Todd Spengler is Variety's New York digital editor. Todd, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, John.
The car chase movie Baby Driver is fueled by its soundtrack, but while everyone is talking about the great mixtape of pop songs that the main character Baby has throbbing in his ears when he's driving, there's a whole symphony of sound sneakily laced within the soundtrack that the average moviegoer may not catch. The Frame contributor Tim Grieving went to Sony Studios to track down the culprit.
Right from the opening logos, you can tell there's something unique about the sound of Baby Driver.
The sound that we all kind of associate in movies with tinnitus, which is that high-pitched whistle tone, we wanted to try and explore different avenues so that it didn't just sound like something that was going to annoy you.
That's sound designer Julian Slater, who has worked on every Edgar Wright film since Shaun of the Dead in 2004. In the film, the main character, Baby, suffers from tinnitus, a ringing in the ears, and Slater wove that into the music and the storytelling.
The tinnitus actually changes in pitch depending on the incoming piece of music. So, for example, the Sony logo was pitched down. That is in the same pitch as the tinnitus it goes into, which in turn is in the same pitch as the car squeal brake that pulls up, which then goes into the bell-bottoms music cue.
More than his tinnitus, Baby is defined by the songs blasting in his earbuds, while he's driving, while he's running, while he's strutting to the coffee shop. And with the help of Slater, the whole world around him seems to be jamming along.
The very beginning of the movie starts with Baby waiting outside whilst his cohorts pull off this bank job. And the movie is kind of laced with lots of audio, I call them Easter eggs, things that as a first-time watch or listen you wouldn't maybe grasp that it works musically. The opening track is this bell-bottoms track by John Spencer Blues Explosion. So if I just play the track on its own. And at this point in the movie, he turns on his windscreen wipers and they are moving in tempo with the music. And I play it with the music cue. At this particular moment in the movie, we've got 3 burger alarms that are all happening at the same time. We introduce them one after the other, and they're all syncopated with the music. So this is one of the alarms. And then the second one we've got is this one, which is a different sounding one, but again. And then the third one is this one. So you got play all 3 together, and this is what we get. We would take each sound as it stood in its own right. We would then tempo map it, pitch correct it, play it into the mix, decide if it worked. If it did work, perfect. If it didn't work, we would then try a different sound.
Midway through the movie, there's a tense meeting that erupts into a gunfight, all while the Champ song Tequila is playing. Edgar Wright has been dreaming up this movie for 2 decades, and several years ago, he hired an English DJ named Ozzy Miso, who has made remixes using sound and dialogue from Wright's other movies, to remix that song using gunfire with this scene in mind.
So when Edgar was on the shoot, all the actors knew that the guns had to go at a certain time. So it was always shot with the playback happening at the same time. Then that's brought back to the cutting room, and Edgar adjusted the picture where needed. And then we set about replacing those guns that Mark had used, years ago, and then adding on top of that. So the things that you see in sync are the guns going bang, 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 but then all the ricochets that are happening in the surrounds are also kind of flicking around and all working with the music at the same time. So let me play this little section here that is just tequila on its own. You get a feel for the music. Okay, and this is the sound design on its own. So if I play the two together now. You know, it's very complicated, but it's an absolute joy to do. And something like this is all down to Edgar. You know, from the very script stage, this was thought out and built into the script, so you can obviously push the parameters a lot further.
For The Frame, I'm Tim Grieving.
Coming up, we visit with the bass player Stephen Bruner, better known as Thundercat, in his LA lair.
The Frame is produced by Southern California Public Radio. More after this break.
Welcome back to The Frame. I'm John Horn. We air twice a day here on KPCC. We're also streaming online at kpcc.org. You can also subscribe to our daily podcast. You'll find it on Stitcher or Apple Podcasts. You can hear my recent interview with the creators of the women's wrestling comedy Glow, and you can find out what it really takes to make it as a music supervisor in the TV business these days. And now, what do musicians Kendrick Lamar, Erykah Badu, Flying Lotus, and the punk band Suicidal Tendencies have in common? Well, they've all collaborated with a bass guitar virtuoso, Thundercat, whose real name is Stephen Bruner. Thundercat is part of a jazz and R&B renaissance that has its roots in South LA. Other principals include saxophonist Kamasi Washington and drummer Ronald Bruner, who is Thundercat's brother. He has had a long collaboration with producer Steven Ellison, also known as Flying Lotus. The pair first worked together on Ellison's album Cosmogramma, and Thundercat was also all over Kendrick Lamar's Grammy-winning album To Pimp a Butterfly. Though he's a prolific collaborator, Thundercat is also a solo artist, and he's a vocalist who recently released his third studio album. It's titled Drunk. He'll hit the stage at the FYF Festival this weekend. The Frame producer Michelle Lands met up with Thundercat at his home to talk about his writing process and how he got so good at playing that six-string bass.
My name is Stephen Bruner, also known as Thundercat, the bassist. The name Thundercat started for me as, you know, of course, the cartoon from the 80s as a kid. It resonated with me, you know, as a child. It was never a thing that I was like, I want you to call me Thundercat. It actually started with my friends describing me in the studio. It was like, there's a guy with a Thundercat shirt, just go find him. Well, I grew up in Compton, 116th and Wilmington. My family is, we're just all musicians. My dad plays drums, my mom plays flute, you know, my older brother plays drums, my little brother plays drums and piano. I just, for some reason, I didn't get the memo, so I just play bass. So, but yeah, it was kind of like, I want to say it's in the DNA a bit, just having very supportive parents that encouraged me to be creative. I don't know what it is about bass guitar. For me, I think it all stemmed from the idea of a sword. Because again, you know, Lionel with his sword from the Thundercats, it was like, I think it stemmed from the infatuation with having something of that manner. That being like the one toy I would play with, it's like I would look back at all the pictures that my mom has of me. And, like from being a baby where it was like I was playing with a busted guitar to the part where I'm in the backyard, a little older, missing my front teeth, but I got like this helmet, this voice-changing helmet, and I got this toy guitar, and then from that to my first bass, it was like around 5, 6 or whatever. I'd be watching cartoons, but I'd be practicing bass, listening to soundtracks from movies, practicing bass, or my mom would always tell me if she saw me sitting there doing nothing, she'd like, go pick up the bass. My high school teacher, Reggie Andrews, was a huge factor in my learning my instrument. He didn't play bass, but it was the part where he gave me a knowledgeable perspective of what it was that I was doing. And I also studied upright bass at Colburn, for a couple years in middle school. David Young was my teacher, and it was part of my curriculum, where after school it was like, okay, well, you have bass lessons at Colburn, Dave would come in and teach me for about an hour, then he'd leave, and I'd just sit there with the bass, just again, and what am I supposed to do now? And just sit there and practice a bit, hitting the bass with the bow like it was like a completely the wrong, it's like a kid left unwatched, The way I met Flying Lotus was at South by Southwest almost 10 years ago. I remember I'd known of his music, and ironic, he knew who I was. It was a moment he had heard, I would imagine, something about me being around, And we both had this moment that I could only describe, like it was like this one scene in Nacho Libre where Escalito and Nacho meet and they decide to team up.
Don't you see? Your skills plus my skills in the ring. Tag team. Oh, you're crazy.
And it was like, okay, let's work. And it's been like almost 10 years since, The first thing we ever worked on was a Zodiac-ish, and he sent it to me in an email. And for me, I was excited, so he just wanted to, I guess he was trying to see what it was, And I remember how excited I was to just get the opportunity to even, and I think at that moment, it was one of those things that was like, all right, let's do this, And it was pretty comedy because the first thing that we realized is that we lived down the street from each other. Worlds apart, but it's like I could literally like walk or ride a bike to his house. I was like, all right, I'm coming over, man. I'll see you. And I'm looking at the little timing. It's like, it says like 5 minutes. I was like, Jesus. I was like, oh my God, I'll be there in like 5 minutes, man. Even though we've moved and changed, like I still live like 5 minutes away. That will be on my tombstone. He lived 5 minutes away from Flying Lotus. We're always working on music. I like to go back to the beginnings of things a lot, like Cosmogramma. I think he was getting to learn me as a musician, and I was getting to learn him as a producer. It was this moment where it was like, him realizing that I could keep up with the music that was changing. And it was just kind of like, he stopped the track one time, and it was like this thing where he was like messing with the time. And it was like, man, keep going, make it faster. And it was just kind of this moment of like, this is awesome. It was like I can play as fast as you can program. That was one of many moments, to come, but I'll never forget that one. That was pretty funny. It was like, he just kind of looked at me and was like, really? For Show You the Way, that came together, started in the process of recording To Pimp a Butterfly, actually. And I remember I had written the hook, or what would be considered the hook of the song. And that was the only thing that existed. It's just like, let me show you. I would play it, and I would play it on repeat, maybe 30-second clip, and I was just kind of like, okay, I don't know what this is, but that's something. somebody asked me at one point, somebody that I wanted to work with, I said, yeah, Kenny Loggins was, one of my heroes, I literally mentioned it on the radio one time. His son heard that and reached out in an email. And, I was kind of like, whoa, the likelihood sometimes stuff you just kind of go, okay, sure. And sure enough, Kenny reached out. The first thing Kenny asked me, he's like, are you joking? He thought that I was joking because, it's kind of like, where's the part where it makes sense, I think he realized that I was very serious. And when we first got together, it was just me and Kenny at first.
Tell me how you feel, Kenny Loggins. Your heart is struggling, baby. Try to believe.
As we were writing and I was playing him a lot of the music that I'd been recording, he was kind of like, he said that he thought it would be a good idea if Michael got involved. I, kind of peed myself a little bit. I was kind of like, and very next session we got together, Michael came.
Michael McDonald. Wake up and dream. Tell on the wall.
It was hilarious and intense. It was like they look exactly the way you would thought they had looked. It was one of the greatest moments I think in my career as a musician ever. Is just Michael McDonald showing up with Kenny Loggins. And the crazy thing that I didn't realize, of course, is that they hadn't ridden together in 20 years or so. That was even a deeper moment for me. I was sitting there, I was like, oh my God, they haven't hung out like this in a while. I wouldn't imagine that's how that song came to be, It was just awesome to feel like I felt like I was worth something. I mean, you can definitely expect more music, of course, that's a constant. One of my good friends, Erykah Badu, said, this isn't a race. And it's like you can't let anybody make you think that. It's not a race. You're just creating music, and there's no time frame on that,
Nobody move, there's blood on the floor. And I can't find my heart.
That was the bass guitarist Thundercat, and as I mentioned earlier, he's part of a community of musicians originally from South LA who are getting a lot of attention these days. Here's some other news about a couple of them. Saxophonist Kamasi Washington was in this year's Whitney Biennial, and the music that he composed for that show will soon be released as an EP called Harmony of Difference. And producer and keyboard player Terrace Martin has a new album with his band, the Polyseeds. It's called Sounds of Crenshaw, and you're hearing some of that now. The LA Times has said the album's 13 tracks, quote, confirm Martin's limitless inspiration, unquote. And that's all for The Frame today. In the coming days, we'll preview Comic-Con, which launches Thursday in San Diego, and the one and only Edie Falco will join us in studio. You can stay in touch with us via Twitter and Facebook, and we promise we won't clog your feed with Game of Thrones tweets. We promise. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Horn. We'll see you tomorrow.